often wonder if teaching is the fruit of information that you transmit, if it is the fruit of experience, or if it is the fruit of the reflection upon your trade. One could think that you can combine them and that you lead by example. So, if you do, how do you formulate the ingredients? How do you organize the facts? For the processes, it's obvious. Harmony, contrapoint, fugue, they are rules which organize the conversation among equals of the polyphony. In interpretation is the understanding of the text beyond the text that you read by extensive studies of articles, of treatises, and ultimately by a acquiring of a know-how that might be no more necessary. Just like reading in the clefs is no more necessary today to transpose at eyesight because you can have it printed in any key. So yes, technique is a tool for a specific gain. If technology replaces the arithmetics, then you don't need arithmetics, you just go to the results. And that could be said in classical music interpretation. You just listen to the recordings of the famous whoever, and you play by ear the famous piece. And when the piece is not famous and not often recorded, and you have to figure it out from the score. And therefore misread it eventually. Willingly? No. Ignorantly? Yeah. And then nobody will agree anyway. Specialists of this versus specialists of that. Wow. Nobody agrees on the same piece. Everybody has a revealed truth that comes from a tradition that is parallel or opposite to yours or to their or others and so on. And I mean, ultimately, it's the same in every trade. When you see two doctors, they don't give you necessarily the same diagnosis. When you see artifacts with archaeologists, they don't completely agree on the dating, on the very specific form of writing that they read one way or another, and how you transpose, or rather translate, therefore how do you really understand the ancient scrolls? Obviously, subjectively. And then ideologies and then opinions impose a certain understanding, and others are considered wrong or dissident. So it's not as dramatic and drastic in music than in science. If you request to say that the theory of the Big Bang is no more relevant, and then other people think that Einstein's theories are either incomplete, either not right either. In classical music, you cannot say Schumann corrected or understood better the music than Monteverdi. It's almost as if there are layers and layers of music styles, genres through the centuries that added their individual being. How they perceive the world left for us, well, not directly, and lots was lost and will never be retrieved, and lots is forgotten or willingly occulted by the decision of the editors of the dictionaries of who are the main and who are the less important secondary composers of each era. It doesn't reflect necessarily the hierarchy in their own time period, far from there, but it's also humbling and revealing how fames of the past are today obscured by the memory, either collectively, either because ideologically we were pushed to think so, because nobody would have enough time to embrace the whole repertoire to make a personal opinion of it, since it's so vast. And of course, in the past, they'd only dealt with their own present mainly, for all kinds of reasons. They couldn't record it, they couldn't keep it, their own past. So the little of the access they had to documentation was also not as much, and they didn't live that long. So it was more the survival and creating in the survival, a Haydn, a Mendelssohn, a Mozart, a Beethoven, a Schumann. They were not ethnomusicologists, they were not historians of ancient musical traditions of different, other than beyond even the Western European civilization. They simply didn't even think about having the time to develop such skills, because that was a luxury they couldn't afford, even if they might have had the intellectual curiosity to know what was it that people thought through music in different civilizations, let less in the same civilization centuries before. Today is the contrary. Classical music seems to be the absolute kingdom of the past, which occupies the present of thousands of musicologists, music scholars, editors, publishers, composers, writers, analysts, niche knowledge people for specific genre in a specific time period, and of course, to the detriment of the fact that on the other side people play the same 12 famous pieces, whichever instrumentally is in vogue in their time period of these. So the piano having the vastest, the trends change with time periods. And the gods of piano music composers of the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st century change a lot in the hierarchy of who are played, who are recorded today compared to who were praised in the past. So it's humbling that everything is passing, even if it appeared to have been the marking ground of their time. So when you teach all these things, do you transmit the knowledge of them? Therefore, through your point of view of what you occult and what you bring out, since you cannot cover all, for lack of time. or because the students need a niche knowledge to be competitive early enough in order to be successful in a competitive world. Therefore, again, they will ignore the research in the niche specific repertoires that demand research and library work, today more online, but still you have to immerse yourself in Elizabethan England, in Renaissance Italy, in Holland, in so on, if you want to really have even scratching the surface of the awareness of the trends of music and the church music and the secular music and the theory of music and the organization of music performances and the social cultural environment in which all this was placed, how music was paid for and used for and organized, and to whom it belonged and for whom it was addressed, and how many were excluded from it, from hearing it, knowing about it, let less making it or learning about it, unless it come from lineage of musicians, like lineage of other trades. And the continents who explore the Western civilization from Renaissance to today, classical music in the Asia today compared to a century ago is an explosion of wealth in terms of demographic of people who come to enrich the meaning of it compared to what used to be European-centered cultural knowledge and awareness. And I think this brings great richness to have new, fresh eyes on an old tradition, which means enough for the new eyes, as well as should open the eyes of those of the tradition who would think that's the only way we know. But no, there are new ways, different ways. The alterity is an enrichment when it's there to produce a meaningful statement for what we serve. The spirit, the meaning, the thought, the purpose of a given genre style in a time period, in a geographic place. And I find it so much enriching that now there are no more boundaries on the continents for classical musicians, and should be no more mentalities pretending to own the tradition in Austria, in Poland, for Mozart or Chopin, because there is a universality of the message, which obviously transcends the tradition, renews the tradition, perhaps fights the tradition, and perhaps ignores the tradition. And so there will be those who will find it disappointing, and those who will find it refreshing and energizing and widening the appeal to the wider audience. The majority of music lovers today do not play an instrument compared to the 19th century's happy few who could afford such pastime culturally and financially, of course. Today, the productive systems of performances of recorded music in any shape or form is on the fingertip of anybody. And so they can choose and make their own musical, build their musical taste among this plethoric available offer, even if lack of knowledge and curiosity from schooling or parents, wherever they grew up, might limit them not to search further. You don't look for galaxies you don't know exist, which is exactly what classical music is in the streaming industry. A lost continent, and from which mostly only the evident famous ones are played. So when you teach, yes, you teach the experience of performance, the experience of learning yourself, the experience of understanding the place of a musician in society. Then you teach also your specific acquired knowledge, not just the experience, what you learned that you didn't know by your intuition when you started music yourself. And then you add to that your conclusion of all of this, which is your conviction. I tried this, I experienced that, I read about this, I compared to these and those, and then I reached the conclusion that this is how it's supposed to be played. So either analytically, either intuitively, either by comparison, either just I feel it, I love it, that's how I like it, and I play it. You give an example, and the student tries to imitate you, either willingly, either obliged, either just to be obedient, and anyway perhaps change mind when they leave the door. But nevertheless, you don't have to explain much, you just play. And it's the fruit of your experience with music, the type of legato phrasing, articulation, innuendo, breathing, pulse, impulse, tempo, but rubato or not, and how much, and the way to deal with the rests and the upbeats and the downbeats, and how you convey this and how you hold back that. By the time you explain it, you get lost in translation, and you display it, you bypass explaining. So then you can say, okay, just play it like me because that's how I love it. That piece, which means to you what perhaps it means differently to me, but I'll try to make sure that it means to you what it meant to me because I'm the teacher, therefore it's asymmetrical. But I think that is only during the vanishing moment of the lesson. After that, the students grab from others, and then they build up finally their own puzzle that is possibly from various different influences, or keep choosing to keep what they would like to keep from what they were exposed to, that they chose to or they were imposed to. And then that's it. It becomes in turn their own conviction, experience, knowledge that they transmit to their own students. Amid all the recordings of many other people, you don't study with those who record because mostly they don't teach, and you study with those who teach even if they record, but you don't even listen to their recordings because they are teachers. They're there in person to transmit, or nowadays even online. But the fruit of the experience is to play artistically the concerto by such as such. And then if you like it, you say, I would like to become like such. And then if you want to go study with that such, well, they don't teach. So they don't have the need, the time, and financially it will make no sense for them if they're successful on stage to sit down and explain. Perhaps they don't think it's explainable, just like composition teachers ultimately don't think it's teachable beyond technique, the inspiration, the organization, the thoughts, all this. Yes, you can pick and choose, copy and observe, and then see how it adapts to your creativity. But how do you teach creativity itself? How do you teach individuality in interpretation itself? You give them options and you let them find their own path in music. I mean, philosophically it makes sense, but in reality, with short-term jury exams, auditions, competitions, and students who are eager to be successful before the 30-year-old's threshold of competition's age limit, they don't think they have time to spare if they're driven by the playing beyond practicing repetitively to play reliably clean, which is a prerequisite but becomes ultimately, for almost half of their young adult life, the aim, a sine qua non condition. We cannot without that. And then beyond, we'll see what happens. And what happens is culture, is knowledge, is emotion, is intellect, it's tradition, is rejection and acceptance, is observing and rethinking the status quo. Perhaps it's not possible to do at the same time 12 hours of daily practicing of sections and practicing to perfect the reliability of the performance during high-stake tensions like competitions and performances, and the very thinking of how you play it, and not the why but the how, and the why you choose that how, other than the direct lineage from a teacher or some example of some admiration from a recording that you sort of are a fan of, and it's like, I would like to play like such and such, that piece. It's sort of simplistic, lacks nuances about which aspect and what, and if you ask the people who recorded it and who are those famous people who might be such hopefully beacons for the students, they might not have the explanation for it. So in fact, it's a very complicated mix for the students to navigate different opinions and who to trust about how much is right to do this or that. Already you have to compare editions that have all the competition among the music scholars who preface them and edit them and give their personal scholarship knowledge, that you have to choose if it's this edition or that, and you have the choice between many who have the claim of authenticity, even if it doesn't compare in details because it differs. And so do you have the time to do that search, or is it because somebody told you this is the edition of the teacher or some friend, trust this, trust that? And then you have the teachers' competition, how's supposed to be played and not supposed to be played, come study with me. And so I understand very well how students seek financially to be able to afford the studies and to see the purpose of them reaching its blooming through success. And where do they place in that their individual relentless curiosity search about the specifics of each of the genres and styles they play? They don't have time. And so perhaps after the competition's threshold of age limit has passed beyond the 30, and by then those who didn't compete reach the level of education with a doctorate, then the teaching becomes the only outlet, more than the performing, which might have been the original, as most of the time it is, motivation from childhood. Nobody child playing piano says, I want to be a harmony teacher. Very few do. I know few, but that's a rarity. So everybody wants to be a performer, an artist. somehow, to be in close connection with the beautiful music we play, to be able technically to play the challenging pieces and to have people to share it with, chamber musicians, audiences, concerts, orchestras, conductors, recordings. But that's given to only very few, chosen by systems, organizations, producers, festivals, directors of marketings, and all kinds of motions of trends that define who is more meaningfully adequate for this repertoire than another, and then create a sense of belonging to a tradition, and on and on and on. So perhaps between 30 and 60, they develop a capacity to, through teaching, to start really going in depth what they didn't have time for when they were driven to practice, to be able to be technically at the basic level, which is already very high compared to generations prior. So perhaps between 60 and 90 is the blessed moment, if one is alive and aware intellectually, to blend harmoniously in the sense of balanced ways, the doing and the being, the understanding and the experiencing of music making, music sharing, music teaching, music receiving, music promoting, not just being.